Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's episode, I want to cover the other Slovenian, Primož Roglič. Covered Tadej Pogačar recently, so now it's time to go into the second Slovenian. Now, up here on Beyond the Coverage, I have Primož Roglič ranked third best rider. But on talent alone, if you're just looking at talent and performance and their gift to be able to do time trials, climb, sprint, and just win overall races, I have Primož Roglič ahead of Jonas Vingegaard. But Jonas Vingegaard's won the Tour de France 2 times, and he's beat Tadej Pogačar each time when he won those. So because of those 2 wins at the Tour de France from Jonas Vingegaard, and because of the amount of crashing that Primož Roglič does throughout his career, I have him as third, Jonas is second, Tadej Pogačar is first in that order. But I still certainly have Primož Roglič ahead of Remco Evenepoel, who's fourth on the list. But when we look at some of the articles coming out in today's cycling news, Primož Roglič is highlighted, and they're talking about last season, about how they came into the Tour de France a bit overcooked. Ralph Aldag talked about doing camps with the team, then going into Dauphiné, then doing another camp, and then going straight to the Tour de France. Now, he mentions in that article what he talks about being complicated is when you get to the Tour de France, if everybody's a little bit cooked, you can't just back off the throttle a little bit because, well, you're at the Tour de France. So he's right. There is something that you have to think about with your riders about taking them up to altitude, as which I talked about last year with Jonas Vingegaard when Visma Lease bike were going up to altitude. I said you could run into some problems because the weather up there could be bad. Ralph Aldag highlighted those same situations that I was talking about last year when I was speaking about Jonas Vingegaard and Visma Lease bike, but it seems like Ralph Aldag had those problems when they're at altitude where it was raining all the time. And of course that causes the morale of the riders to drop. It might affect their training too, certainly, but it does have effect on morale, and morale, once that starts to drop lower, that can affect for the Tour de France. So Ralph Aldag in this article with Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe is talking about how they're going to have to be careful getting their riders ready, and that's why they have mental coaches and such being added to the team to have everybody in the right frame of mind and physically in the right place to start the Tour de France this year. Well, Primož Roglič has one obstacle that comes before the Tour de France, and it's called the Giro d'Italia. We start looking at Primož Roglic's schedule, though. He only has 2 races. He has Algarve and he has Catalonia. Now, the upside about both these 2 races, if I was going to pick any beginning of the season spring races before you get into the Giro, Algarve and Catalonia, I think, are the 2 safest races. I am not saying Primož Roglič will not crash in those races, but if there's races that Primož Roglič can do and make it through safer, these 2 races of Algarve and Catalonia, those are the safest 2 races on the calendar that I did throughout my career. They're just important enough to still arrive with good form, but not important enough to worry about winning necessarily. But going good there is nice. And of course, the stress and less crashes that they have at those races, when you compare them to Paris-Nice or you start going over the Basque Country, those 2 races, even Trino Adriatico, is much better than Paris-Nice and the Basque Country, but still probably not as smooth and calm as what you would see at Catalonia or Algarve. Close. Very, very close. Trino Adriatico is a pretty calm race. That's why I always enjoyed going over to Italy to start my racing season. But these 2 races, Catalonia, Algarve, fantastic places for Primož Roglič to start, and a great way to bring him into the Giro d'Italia without any crashes. Now that will bring us back into the article where Ralph Aldag says that if the team was to win the Giro d'Italia, that would make the preparation between the Giro and the Tour de France more calm, and more calm during the Tour de France. So if Primož Roglič does win the Giro d'Italia, can come through those first 2 races and come into the Giro and win that. Remember, he has some stiff competition at the Giro at this moment listed on the rosters. We have both Simon and Adam Yates going from UAE Team Emirates and from Visma Lease bike. And then we start looking at some other riders with Ayuso going, Egan Bernales going, and we start looking at Carapaz arriving at the Giro. There is some depth there to push Primož Roglič, but like we already saw last year with Tadej Pogačar, first page riders are not affected by Grand Tour races like we've seen in the past. In the past, I don't know if I recall riders other than Eddie Merckx, of course, who's won everything and was able to win throughout the whole seasons. But other than riders like Eddie Merckx, I don't recall riders being so dominant that they can come into Grand Tours and win so easy like we saw Tadej Pogačar win the Giro last year. Now, Primož Roglič, as I've told you, what I believe is the number 2 best rider in the world. So if he can come into the Giro in his top form, I believe he's very close to Tadej Pogačar type form when he starts the Giro this year. That means that he shouldn't have so much complications with the Yates brothers. He shouldn't have so much complication with Juan Ayuso. And the big surprise that might be coming there, and I told you if I had to pick one young rider in the earlier video this week, that it'd be Del Toro. Well, Del Toro, the Mexican rider, he might come into a surprise after getting another year going in there, but I don't expect it to happen, but it may happen. So Primož Roglič being a first-page rider, doing the Giro as we saw with Tadej Pogačar last year, he can do the Giro, win, come out of that stress-free if he does win without any crashes, that is. If he comes out of the Giro, then he can focus 100% going into the Tour de France, and he has 5 weeks to get ready. Now, in that same article, Ralph Aldag talks about how he has never seen Primož Roglič come into a bike race unless he was sick or injured somehow after training and not be on fantastic form. I believe and agree 100% with Ralph Aldag, the director sportif for Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, that is true about Primož Roglič. That Slovenian and the other Slovenian, Tadej Pogačar, know what to do in training, and they know how to come into bike races and be prepared to win. Primož Roglič, if you look at last season, when he came in and started Paris-Nice, he didn't win Paris-Nice, but he was sick just before Paris-Nice. When he arrived at the Basque Country last year, he was on unbelievably remarkable top form at the Basque Country, and even missed the turn in the individual time trial, did a couple turns to get back onto the course, and still won the individual time trial. Had it not been for the stage 4 crash at the Basque Country, that most likely would have been a victory to Primož Roglič and some of the best form we have seen from the Slovenian, which would have set him up coming into later races. Even when we look at the Dauphiné, he still managed to win the Dauphiné while crashing at the Dauphiné. Now, when we get into the Tour de France, you'll say, Chris, he wasn't as good as Tadej Pogačar, Jonas Vingegaard, or Remco Evenepoel. That's why when he crashed out, he was 4th. But he had already crashed at the Dauphiné, so coming into the Tour de France at 100% is a tall task to ask any athlete to do after you've crashed as much as Primož Roglič had in the 24 season. So, I love this calendar program for Primož Roglič because most of all, I think it's very calm starting at Algarve, and certainly when we look at Catalonia, that's a great transition races to go from those 2 races, keep the legs flowing a bit on Primož Roglič, and then go into training mode before he starts the Giro. So I think we'll see him win the Giro. I couldn't imagine anyone arguing with me that Primož Roglič is the outright favorite. I see Wout van Aert possibly winning stage 1, holding on to it after the short individual time trial that's only about 13-14 kilometers on stage 2. Stage 3 has a little bit of a question mark. Stage 4 again looks good for a Wout van Aert. So Primož Roglič has those first 4 days where he can stay a little bit calm at the Giro and race his legs back into form if he's not 100% on form, but I expect the Slovenian will be, so he could have the race leader's pink jersey on stage 2. But if not, he can ride those first 4 days, staying calm, relaxed with his teammates from Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, because he has great riders going with him, with Jai Hindley and Martinez there, and of course, Jan is going to be there, the other Slovenian, to back him up, the new Super Domestique that they signed this year to Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe. So with those 3 riders and another rider still waiting to see who they're going to add to the list, Primož Roglič has at least 2 solid climbers and 1 Jan Tratnik that's a Super Domestique that at times can get deep into the mountains. So he looks good at the Giro. He can relax all the way into stage 5 of the Giro with just some solid form getting him into stage 5, and then he has to be good there. So this year's program, Primož Roglič looks solid to go into the Giro, win the Giro, and then come out of the Giro like we saw Tadej Pogačar come out of last year's Giro, where he won and basically was untouched and never put to the sword at any point in time through the stages. You might say stage 1, but I don't think so. That wasn't a whole lot of work for Tadej Pogačar. But with other than that, Tadej Pogačar rode through the Giro as a training camp. So if Primož Roglič can come through the first 2 races of the season, arrive at the Giro, flow through the Giro like we saw Tadej Pogačar last season, well, then he has the 5 weeks of just some nice recovery after the Giro, a few good weeks of training, a softer week coming into the Tour de France, and then we could see the Slovenian on 100% form so he can battle the number 1 Slovenian in the world, Tadej Pogačar, along with Jonas Vingegaard and Remco Evenepoel. It's going to be a remarkable season. Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, I like the program for Primož Roglič. He should be able to get into the Giro in fine form. Then he's just got to make it through the craziness that the Giro has on some of those rainy days. If he does that, I think it's a great program to bring Primož Roglič into the Tour de France with chance of seeing the Slovenian on his top form and possibly going through a whole season, early half of the season, without crashing before the Tour de France begins, which means we're going to see a remarkable battle in 2025 in July at the Tour de France. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next video real soon.